Good evening. We'll make a start in about 30 seconds if people are ready. Thank you.
Just the doors.
So, good evening and welcome to this special Cabinet meeting before our full council a little later on. Colleagues, we are not expecting a fire. So if there is one, then we need to exit from the side door, assuming that all is clear in that direction. Can I remind colleagues to make sure that mobile phones and other devices are on silent or turned off? June, have we been live streamed? I'm slightly confused on this.
Yes, Councillor Darling, we're being live streamed this evening.
But so not hybrid, because we don't have that interactive facility at the moment, but we will be later. So, declarations of interest. Does any colleagues have any declarations of interest?
No.
No. Apologies?
No apologies.
Right, okay, thank you. And then moving on to the main meat of the meeting. So, budget monitoring and governance. Councillor Cowell, I understand you had the joys of overview and scrutiny meeting last night, where it's resulted in a recommendation for this evening.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Darling. There was an extensive conversation last night at overview and scrutiny, which was 4.5 hours of debate, thereabouts, and it's resulted in a revised recommendation from Cabinet to Council this evening, and in considering the Chief Executive's report and the Officer's revised recommendation, which is printed in the packs and in your paperwork, if you've got paperwork. So basically, we're recommending that we defer consideration of the officer recommendations numbers 1, 2 and 3 in light of last night's deliberations to an extraordinary council meeting to be held by the end of this month. So the revised recommendation going to Cabinet will just solely be on the item 4, which was in relation to Tor Vista, and the uplift by £500,000 to 1.5 million in terms of the working capital facility for Tor Vista Homes. So with that, I'll move that revised recommendation.
Thank you. And just to clarify, you said Cabinet, but I'm sure you meant full council, going to full council, the recommendation. So thank you. Councillor Long, are you happy to second? Well, no, I'm seconding.
You're seconding.
So I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going on to the next one where you're. So yeah, I'm happy to second this recommendation, and I'll hold my peace for the moment. Do any colleagues wish to comment at this stage?
Darling, Councillor Thomas is just indicating as though, I think, a procedural question.
Right. Councillor Thomas, do come in.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm just a little bit lost, to be honest. I'm following the paperwork, but I don't know where we're starting. I presume we would have been starting at the beginning, so my apologies. Sorry.
Well, Councillor Thomas, we've had the recommendation proposed by Councillor Cowell. I'm seconding it. That's where we've got to at this stage. Anne-Marie, are there any reflections that you may wish to give at this stage?
Can we just ask Councillor Cowell for what page we're on then? That would be helpful.
My apologies. There was one element of the recommendation as well. It set a Cabinet working party for the Capital Contingency Fund working party to be established based on political balance, which is a total of 7 councillors, being 2 Liberal Democrats, 3 Conservatives and 2 Independents. And the membership to include the leader of the council, myself as deputy leader, with the following terms of reference. which is to review the details and business cases of proposed allocations from the Capital Contingency Fund due to be allocated by the Chief Finance Officer.
Okay, thank you for that.
Has it not been circulated?
The overview scrutiny has been
Been circulated to all, is it only with Cabinet members at this stage?
No, so I understand the Overview and Scrutiny Board report from last night has been circulated for Cabinet and Council, and then there have been further reflections from yourselves in respect of the wider recommendations that were set out and the officers' revised recommendations which were published on
Monday.
yesterday, the 12th of October. So there's two elements that are being picked up by the Cabinet this evening, which is the Working Party, which was the recommendation that went through the board last night, with a change in the numbers, I understand, Councillor Cowell, and then in response to the establishment of the extra council meeting on the 27th of October. But in addition to the board's recommendations, I understand you wish to defer the officers' recommendations, which were listed at number 1 to 3, with just Tor Vista being presented to council meeting tonight. Is that correct, Councillor Cowell?
That's correct, June.
Okay, so colleagues, it's been proposed and seconded. Anne-Marie, do you have any reflections before we move on to any further debate?
Councillor Darling, wanting to clear up what there's a confusion. I think Councillor Lewis and Councillor Thomas are indicating that the issues weren't discussed last night. Obviously, the decision of Overview and Scrutiny supported the creation of a capital working party. And in light of that, Cabinet, in their preparation for this afternoon, have considered further the makeup of that and are proposing this evening or this afternoon that actually a slightly wider, a larger working party be created than was within the original officer report, as Councillor Cowell set out. So the working party to comprise of 7 councillors, that would be made up of 2 Liberal Democrat councillors, 3 Conservative councillors and 2 independent councillors, with the membership, as we discussed last night, to include the leader and the deputy leader, Councillor Cowell.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure that that's cleared up any confusion. So, Councillor Darling, I was wondering before proceeding whether there is anything further from Councillor Lewis or Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, Chairman, I'm quite happy with that, but it was put forward as what Overview and Scrutiny voted on last night. They didn't vote on the... If you remember, Chief Executive, I brought it up with you about the numbers, and you said, no, that is not part of the vote. That is part of the vote. I don't want to go through yesterday's argument. I just...
So it was the principle
what
last
Councillor
night.
Cowell was saying was not what I'd known before. Therefore, and there's no paperwork for us, so we couldn't follow. Councillor Cowell said this is a recommendation from Overview and Scrutiny. It wasn't. It was the recommendation from Overview and Scrutiny, and then what the Cabinet have put on it. Now I quite understand what it is. No, it's not the recommendation from Overview and Scrutiny, which is fine.
So it's building on, building on.
Councillor Cowell, are you satisfied that all is laid out to your satisfaction?
I believe it is, Chair.
Yep, and I have seconded. Colleagues, is there any further debate or any reflection from the overview and scrutiny from Cabinet colleagues? June, any hands raised?
No, Councillor Darling.
Okay. Any from any other members within the room? No. Okay, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. So, colleagues, we now move into onto the next item on the agenda, that's investment zones. Councillor Long, sorry I was preemptive previously. I understand you may wish to present this recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's unlike you to be premature. And I don't really want to ever reflect on the overview and scrutiny meeting of last night, but but we'll move on. So this item is on the investment zones. The government announced in September of this year the establishment of investment zones in England. We understand that the government envisages that investment zones will be one or more specific sites within, in our case, the upper tier local authority area. The government expects such sites to be able to deliver quickly additional housing and contribute to economic growth. The government has indicated that potential sites may be aligned with existing local growth strategies, transport plans, have a master plan, etc. Torbay Council has to submit an expression of interest if it wants to by 12 noon tomorrow, the 14th of October, with confirmation that the local planning authority supports this proposal. And I understand that the chair of planning, Councillor Pentney, and the divisional director of planning, housing and climate change has also indicated agreement as well. Exactly which sites the council will put forward is being considered literally as we speak, whilst we also await some of the criteria from the government as well as to exactly how they want them prioritised, etc. We will obviously we'll obviously have to keep an eye on the detail of the investment zone proposals, as some of those criteria are unclear. For example, the relaxation of some planning policies and changes to developer contributions might be of particular interest to our neighbourhood planning colleagues, for example. But obviously we'll keep an eye on those. But obviously we'd like to proceed in the interim and have an expression of interest and keep in the game. So I'd like to propose the decision in item 3.1, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Mike Morey, I understand you may wish to second.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm going to be brief because I'm actually seconding this, if I'm perfectly honest, with a degree of suspicion. Councillor Long mentioned waiting for more information from the government. What we have received so far is very little detail. And this only is added to the issue of we've got to submit an expression of interest. Okay, not in detail, but tomorrow. Is it tomorrow? Tomorrow. Where is the detail? It's much easier to work on an issue when you have the detail in front of you. We know, I'm going to sound like Chris Lewis now, I know that the government under the Prime Minister Truss is floundering a bit in the dark. We only had to see that with the mini budget and the repercussions of that, where the Bank of England has had to step in. That again was because of the lack of detail within that budget, and unfortunately that's what we're facing again at the minute. The other concern that I do have, and Councillor Long did allude to it, and that is the government's commenting on the desire to liberalise the planning process. To me, if I'm perfectly honest, that smacks of a developer's charter, giving them the freedom to develop anywhere, including in our green spaces. I'm yet to be proved wrong, and I hope I will be proved wrong. But the message I think we need to send to Liz or to the Prime Minister is you can't have it both ways. You can't say protecting green spaces one hand and then the next hand you're giving carte blanche to the developer. So I'll second this, but we do need to be shouting out loud. We don't want half-hearted policies. We actually want detail to accompany them. Chairman, I'll so second with suspicion.
Thank you, Councillor Morey. And I reflect to myself that we are short of £600 million as a local authority. That we've lost since austerity. Our budget this year is £96 million short, if you look at year on year, of what the gap is compared to what we used to receive in funding. And actually, what we rather than gimmick after gimmick that we seem to have from the government that just is a series of gimmicks, that we just need proper funding for local authorities so we can get on and do the doing for our local communities rather than a series of gimmicks. We look at what we've had in recent months in respect of the county deal. That has sucked officer capacity away from much stuff that we wanted to be doing and getting ahead with dealing with working up documents for that, and yet that's vanishing over the horizon beyond Christmas. And it is just an absolute joke, the Conservative government, as far as they talk about that they want to reduce the civil service, and it is just ridiculous that they then want to do this command and control from Westminster, and they should be utterly ashamed of themselves, because if they actually reduce the number of civil servants in Westminster and actually gave the more money to local government, we'd be able to deliver for our communities rather than wanting to have this over-centralised, command and control state that the Conservatives want to have all the time. And it's utterly shameful, especially with the kamikaze, approach that we've seen to our economy that is just crucifying our local economy. And anybody who has a sizable mortgage is being completely, screwed over by the system, thanks to the totally incompetent, Conservative government. So I think that we do need to swim with the tide. However, we may have misgivings about this. I think the positive thing is that we need to be alive to what the challenges are that Councillor Morey alluded to. I would say, colleagues, I have had an email from some of the people who Liz Truss named and shamed as the anti-growth group from the Woodland Trust, that area of deep far leftism, who are gravely concerned and want us to be cautious in our approach to this. And I have been in touch and assured the Woodland Trust that we will be consulting with them, but I suspect that we will be cautious with which other areas we choose to put forward in due course. Councillor Stockman, I understand that you may wish to contribute.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've got more questions than answers. So if we're doing this speedily because we need to show an expression of interest, at what point will we know which sites are going to be put forward? At what point can we either not wish to take it up or not? Because if you actually read a lot of the information on it, it says things like remove burdensome EU requirements. Read for that the ecological side of things, and that bothers me. It says things like all investment zones will have a mandate to boost growth in the zones, and the planning system will not stand in the way of investment and development, which makes me feel, ooh, so they're going to knock, the planning system out the water. How does that relate to our refresh of both our neighbourhood plans and our own local plan? And so for me, there's more questions than answers at this point. I don't want to, I want to see the sites we're putting forward personally, and I want to know, the ramifications of it. And I'm sure my colleagues across the room will say this, we don't want to get partway down through something, see that we've got it, and then either not spend it or not want it. So it's, I'd need more information at this stage. If it's just, stick a finger in the air and see if we get something and then it works out, that's one thing. But if we're actually going to be submitting plans and, sites and all the rest of it, no, it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Stockman, I think that if we do not like the look of some of the elements of this once it's become clearer, then we choose not to negotiate. But until we've got that information, we're not in that position to have discussions. And June, any other hands from Cabinet colleagues? Councillor Cowell, do come in.
Thank you, Chair. And I echo many of those concerns expressed by colleagues. It does feel like it's policy making on the hoof. Yeah, and we've had levelling up, and we're not sure where that's going. But the one element of this expression of interest and the drip feeding of the criteria from DLUC that really is frustrating is that it doesn't appear that the expressions of these investment zones will actually attract additional grant funding to get projects over the line. And we've been having serious conversations last night at Overview and Scrutiny within the Cabinet, within the Council and officers about our substantial capital programme, which is about driving economic regeneration vis-à-vis growth in our town centres in particular. And given the fact that we were successful in the Town Deal and Future High Streets Fund a couple of years ago, bringing in just over 40 million, because we were able to demonstrate those local plans and master plans for those two town centres in particular that were inspired by our communities and the contributions through the neighbourhood planning process. Since that £40 million was awarded, we've had massive capital inflation through building and, of course, the cost of borrowing, which has gone through the roof because of the recent mini-budget. If these investment zones are to be able to attract additional grant for gap funding effectively, then there will be even greater merit. But as Vice Chair of Torquay Neighbourhood Forum, who are in the midst of revising our Torquay Neighbourhood Plan, it does give me concern when I hear terms of liberalisation of the planning system. And yet we hear from the Prime Minister during her leadership campaign this year that in fact that she wants to stop top-down dictatorial edicts coming out of Westminster and handing back control to local authorities. So, you know, the devil's going to be in the detail. I think it's perfectly right that we have our skin in the game and that we submit the expressions of interest, see what further details emerge, and see how far the EOI progresses with DLUC, and then we can review it on an ongoing basis. Yeah. I hope it's good news for Torbay, but I have a big question mark behind that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, Councillor Long, do you have any reflections? And then I'll come to Anne-Marie for any reflections from her. Sorry?
Councillor Law.
Right. Sorry, Councillor Cordelia Law first, though.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so I actually wasn't going to speak on this issue, and I recognise the need for investment, and particularly for housing in Torbay, and like my colleagues. Sorry, I can't look at you all because otherwise I lose the microphone. So, and, you know, like my colleagues, I'm all too acutely aware of how constrained we are for building land, which in turn always threatens our green fields. So I also know that after years of austerity and local authority budgets being cut to the bone, that if we want investment and support from this government to address some of the issues in the current economic climate, we're going to have to bid into yet another pot of funding. So I will support this application being submitted. And as I say, I was going to remain tactfully silent. However, and for me, this is a big however, I simply cannot remain silent when we are facing potentially the biggest attack on nature in living memory. I simply can't remain silent as our environment becomes a victim of the latest Conservative Prime Minister's reckless pursuit of what appears to be unsustainable growth and ideological deregulation. The CEO of the Campaign to Protect Rural England has called investment zones deregulation on steroids, and the RSPB, Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, described them as an unprecedented attack on nature, posing a real threat to the recovery of biodiversity in England. The RSPB goes further, actually, and accuses the government of trashing environmental protections, saying they sound much more like destruction zones than investment zones to us. The UK is already one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world, with more than 40% of our remaining wildlife in decline, and many species are crashing towards extinction. And those of you who watched BBC News last night will have heard the concerns voiced by not just the Wildlife Trust, but actually 3 of our major organisations, such as the National Trust, Wildlife Trust and the RSPB. But there are many, many wildlife and rural organisations coming out against this. It's deregulation under the guise of economic help. It's the CEO of Rewilding Britain says the pace and scale of the government's plans and the lack of transparency and consultation are shocking. And they go on to say it's also electorally bizarre given overwhelming public support for nature recovery and climate action. It was only 18 months ago that we had the last Prime Minister who, trying to actually boost his green credentials, talking about the Dasgupta review on the economics of biodiversity. The report stresses how the natural world and the economy were, and this is a quote from the report, completely embedded in each other. The report said, if we want a strong economy, then we must look after nature as well. And that does not mean throwing out all the rules. Yet here we are in a situation where our newly unelected Prime Minister is actually enabling local authorities like us to ride roughshod over environmental protections in pursuit of unsustainable goals. And I suppose what I'm looking for is some reassurance can be given to me before I vote on this, that we will not be putting forward any areas of outstanding beauty or triple SIs or use the guise of investment zones to throw away our environmental commitments and our biodiversity responsibilities. Thank you. I'd like that reassurance if possible.
Thank you. And I think just to be clear, I think it's important that we explore where the possible sites are that are under serious consideration for us to consider as a local authority putting in. So I just want to share that with colleagues. So as far as Torquay Town Centre and in respect of the Union Square, and that area of development around the town deal element is one area. Another area is the identified area for Edginswell, where there is clearly identified in the local plan already housing development site as well as business development site. So that's land that's already been identified there. And then as far as Paignton Town Centre, we're looking at the Victoria Square development as an opportunity there. And then the other one echoes the levelling up proposals, both in Brixham Town Centre and the levelling up proposals out at the back end of Paignton, which is to do with our EPIC proposals or our electronic and photonics manufacturing site. So those are all sites where would not be impacting on areas of outstanding natural beauties or triple SIs. They've been carefully considered, but the jury remains out on those, and officers are giving those serious consideration. I just wanted to make sure that members were fully cited on that before further consideration was given. Councillor Long, do you have any reflections? And then I'll go to Anne-Marie, and I also have Dave as well. Sorry, Councillor Thomas to go to as well. Councillor Long.
Not for the first time, Mr. Chairman, you have trodden all over much of what my reflections were going to be. But just to add to the sites that you mentioned, one of the difficulties is that I think the government will want sites that we are wanting to progress, if we indeed do, a prioritisation of them. And that's very difficult for us to do because we don't know quite what the benefits are yet and whether they would be suitable for the sites that we have in mind. So that's the kind of chicken and egg situation that we're in. I was quite shocked earlier, Mr. Chairman, that I had been supportive of the Woodland Trust previously, but I hadn't quite realised how hard left and Marxist they were. And then Councillor Law then reeled off a whole load of others that I hadn't realised were part of the anti-growth coalition. But but I echo everyone's sentiments on those, and we won't wish to indicate trampling all over our countryside. Thank you.
Anne-Marie, do you have any reflections? Then I have Councillor Thomas and Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman.
D&C.
Just briefly, clearly the council is working incredibly hard to regenerate our town centres through future high streets, through Town Deal, and the areas which we are considering absolutely align to that in terms of, for example, Torquay, the Union Street area and Town Hall area there, rather than any specific sites within. But what we do know is that the expression of interest is the first hurdle, and then it will be discussions that are opened with government. And it will be within those discussions as to what necessary streamlining of planning processes is referred to. I hear absolutely liberalisation has been used this evening. Certainly what I've read talks about streamlining of planning processes, but absolutely protecting the fundamentals that members and our communities hold dear in terms of planning. So as I say, if we are fortunate enough to be accepted through that expression of interest process, then it will be the start of the conversation. And absolutely, all that I've read thus far indicates it absolutely is that conversation, members. So I wanted to give that reassurance. And as we say, submission by 11:59 tomorrow.
Thank you. Councillor Dave Thomas.
Thank you very much indeed, Leader. Thank you. I was just about to say that the expression of interest deadline does close tomorrow at 11:59. And I've heard 1, 2, 3.5 speeches about why we shouldn't be doing this. And to be honest, I'm absolutely gobsmacked to be sitting here. Because my first question, in all honesty, was going to be, I understand that the investment zones are areas that we as a council designate. We can create exactly where the line is ourselves. And I would have imagined that the Cabinet, to be fully up to speed with what those investment zones are, where they're going to be, how many of them there are, because the expression of interest goes in tomorrow morning. Now, it's not here in any report, and yet some kind of secret squirrel club, there's probably only 2. Thankfully, the leader knows which ones they are, and he just gave us a little bit of an insight. Certainly, Councillor Stockman is blind to it. Councillor, my apologies, Morey, who is the portfolio holder for planning, is blissfully unaware, and Councillor Law is clearly unaware of which sites could be included. I just find this so bizarre to be sitting here at a Cabinet meeting expecting, the Cabinet to be telling us what's coming forward. How are our community have any insight? This administration has all been about consultation, about being open and transparent, allegedly. And here we have a recommendation, a proposed decision, that the Chief Executive be instructed to submit an expression of interest for investment zone designation. In less than half a day, that request has to be lodged with DLUC. And so I cannot believe that at whatever time it is, 4:30 today, that the rest of the Cabinet are blissfully unaware what sites are coming forward. We did have a mayor do something very similar with land release funds in my time, and it just does seem as though none of the lessons of the land release fund saga that the wider council know anything about. And what is bizarre is actually the whole of the Cabinet don't know anything about it. One thing's for certain, the rest of the council don't know any of the sites. We have a little bit of an inkling now, and I really do thank you for that. It is appreciative. But I just can't understand why that wasn't shared with the Cabinet beforehand, because they're here to make a decision.
Councillor Thomas, you're getting a little repetitive now. Thank you. Councillor Chris Lewis.
Thank you very much. I won't rise to the bait on your political points. The only thing I would say is maybe you should look and put your own house in order with 3.5 million overspend and 12 million capital black hole. So before you start talking about government, maybe we can get the council in order. Very simple question I wanted to ask. The Chairman of Planning has been consulted. Can you confirm who the Chairman of Planning is, please?
So I'll address that at the end of the meeting. I have Councillor Cowell next.
Thank you, Chair. This partnership has always been committed to as widespread consultation as is humanly possible. But it's not that easy when we've not had the clear published guidance, and it's been drip-fed since the announcement, which I believe was on the 24th of September, when guidance to investment zones in England was published. And then within a few days of that, the deadline of 11:59 on the 14th of October was published. That's made it impossible for us to have the widest consultation. We would love to have been able to speak to the community partnerships, ward councillors, business groups, the neighbourhood forums about our proposals. And if we'd been given a couple of months to do that, then we would have been able to do it. But it's not our decision that the deadline is 11:59 tomorrow. It's your government's decision. And as far as the reference to the overspend this year, I guarantee you, as Cabinet Member for Finance, that by the end of this financial year, we will deliver a balanced budget. Because we have to, in law. It's a pity Kwasi Kwarteng didn't think about that when he had his mini-budget, which was uncosted and without any oversight from the Office of Budget Responsibility. But that £3.5 million overspent is being exacerbated because of the increase in energy costs, with or without any additional caps. We may get a little bit of relief because of the national insurance U-turn. I think we can start calling this government the flip-flop government, because they seem to U-turn at the drop of a hat. But we will deliver a balanced budget. I hope that on Halloween, the Chancellor rises in the House of Commons and explains how they're not going to cut taxes, they're not going to cut public spending. So let's see how the party opposite, that used to be renowned for its prudence with economic management, actually turns this dinosaur around. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mike Morey, would you like to come in?
Just to correct a couple of facts. You're wrong, David, or Councillor Thomas. We've had the Cabinet that has had a number of discussions, even last night, about possible options of sites. So it wasn't a case that it's just a couple. The Cabinet has had a good discussion, actually, on that. I have never said we opposed, which came across that I opposed, another opposed, submitting an expression of interest. What I did say was I would second supporting that, but we do need more detail. And I've just posed a question. Can we trust the government over as we've seen in recent weeks? I just want to wait for the details to arrive.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Morey. And just to confirm for colleagues, because a question was put, that Councillor Nick Pentney and also the Divisional Director for Planning, David Edmondson, have both been consulted and confirmed where they are as far as investment zones are concerned. I'd also like to confirm that I've dropped a line to members of our Place Leadership Board, which is a couple of dozen people earlier on in the week with a broad outline of what investment zones are about and some rough ideas of what opportunities we saw there would be in Torbay, and asked for their comments and views on this. I'm very grateful for the positive engagement that we've had from some of those members of that board who have helped shape the response that we're going to be able to give back to central government in due course. So, colleagues, it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Okay, thank you. That's been passed. That concludes the meeting. Thank you, everyone.